So I'd like to introduce Nathan Babbitt, who is just past his 6 years with OCFA. So congratulations. He's a fire inspector and has been involved in a lot of OCFA activities, the Orange County Fire Authority. And we're looking forward to hearing from you, Nathan, on a variety of ways we can stay protected, how we can create the best, safest home, and of course, answer any questions that folks may have, or if they want to have OCFA come out and provide a little guidance. You'll be telling us about that.
Of course, yeah, thanks for having us. All right, so I'm gonna start sharing my screen here. Let's see. I'll pull up our PowerPoint. All right, can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Cool. Let me go to our first slide.
Perfect.
And we'll go present. Okay, so my name is Nathan Babbitt. I'm fire inspector with the Orange County Fire Authority. Started back in March of 2020. I currently work in our community wildfire mitigation unit. So the way our prevention department, our community risk reduction department is split up is we have new construction, which does new construction inspections, fire alarms, fire sprinklers. We have our prevention field services. They do the annual business inspections. And then the community wildfire mitigation group has 6 inspectors, and our job is working with communities to do vegetation inspections, complaint investigation, and educate homeowners on home hardening, vegetation management, to, as our objective states, to reduce the destructive impacts of wildland fires in Orange County. Next. Okay. So we'd like to start these presentations just by going over a little bit of fire history in the county. This slide right here, what we like to point out is kind of pay attention to the dates at the bottom. So as you can see, they all happen between October, about middle of November. So there's about a 3-week window within the last almost 35 years where we tend to see typically see our most destructive wildfires. What also occurs during this time generally is when we get our Santa Ana winds. So we get the hot, dry winds coming out, blowing towards the ocean. All it takes is a spark at that point, and then it's off to the races. Another thing too we see with these fires is we see long range spotting. So we'll see embers traveling miles ahead of the fire front. So we tell homeowners too during these wind driven events is a lot of times you might not actually see the actual flaming front. It could be 2, 3, 4 ridges over from you, and you're going to start getting impacted by your embers. Another thing too is because of that, most of the homes, and we'll go over home hardening in a couple slides, most of the homes are lost because of ember intrusion. So a lot of our homes are already on fire before the flaming front actually gets to the home. And then as I think Bob stated, once the flaming front goes through, if those homes have been impacted by embers, they kind of sit in the vegetation around the home. They're sitting in the attic, and then the wind just keeps puffing it up, and then homes can ignite even after the fire has gone through. So ember intrusion is the biggest contributing factor to our home loss. Like I said, a lot of people think it's like the TV shows, the fire's going to come racing out of the canyon and take the home out. But in these wind-driven fires, the reality is your home is going to be involved, most likely be involved before the fire front even gets there. Another thing too, I like to point out is kind of the structures lost. So as we've learned from previous fires, we've gotten to a point where during these wind-driven events, we've reduced structure loss, and that's through our operations reviewing their training, so after action reports, but also it comes down to vegetation management and home hardening. So for example, the Silverado fire in October of 2020, which happened on the same day as the Blue Ridge fire up in Yorba Linda, the Silverado fire started off of Santiago Canyon Road, and the winds carried it up into the north and eastern half of Irvine. That whole area has been built within the last 10 years. So they have field modification plans, which we'll go over in a couple slides. So they have a specific planting plan for the perimeter of the community, which creates a fire break between the open space and the community. And then also all the homes in there are built with it was formerly Chapter 7A, and it's now in the California Wildland Urban Interface Code. It's built with certain building features that we'll go over as well. That homes can be retrofitted to that prevent that ember intrusion. So as the years have gone on and we've unfortunately lost homes, we've also taken a lot of information from that and actually gotten better at making sure that, if these homes are being built in this area, they're being built in the safest way possible. Let's see if we go next slide. Okay. As you guys heard, though, fire season is year-round. So we had the bonfire and the emerald fire. Bonfire was in Santiago Canyon as well. It would burn through the Silverado Majestic area. We did lose 31 structures, older structures out in there. And we had the emerald fire, which burned above Emerald Bay and Laguna Beach. The thing with these two fires was they were also offshore wind events. So we typically see them in the fall, but if the conditions are right, we can see offshore winds in December. We can see offshore winds all the way even into February as well. The kind of oddball in the group is the coastal fire from May of 2022. We like to bring this up as well because if the topography is right, if the vegetation is extremely dense, or at this point we had been through several years of drought, we can still have a pretty destructive fire even with onshore winds. So this fire, the winds were blowing off the coast. It was in the 70s. The humidities were relatively high. We weren't seeing typical, what we typically see during our large fires. Fire started at the bottom of the canyon. The topography was just right. It raced up the hillside and impacted the community of Coronado Point. Another thing too, though, is even though this fire had onshore winds, all the homes that were lost, those 20 structures that were lost from ember intrusion. So a lot of these homes were still 300, 250 feet away from the actual fire front itself because it burned up into the field modification that the community had, an older field modification. But the wind carried the embers in and they got up into the attics and the eaves and the vegetation around the homes. The thing to point out too with this fire, well, two things that we want to point out real quick. The two homes that survived facing the open space were built within the last 10 years as well. So they had the hardened features. They had enclosed eaves. One of the homes, none of the vents faced into the canyon. The vents were on the front of the home. So when the embers came blowing up, the embers couldn't find their way in there. So they were basically built what we call a hardened home, where the homes around it were built in the 90s and unfortunately were lost. Another thing too is we still, even on this fire, saw spotting of a quarter mile. So you can see if the fire outline, there's a little tiny dot down the corner on the other side of, I believe it's Pacific Island Drive. Right over here, we still had a quarter mile spot from an ember. So even though we didn't see the typical offshore winds, even on an onshore wind condition, embers are still an issue and they can still travel a significant distance and spread the fire further than what people might assume. So fire hazard severity zones. This is a pretty hot topic, especially recently with the new ones that were developed or released by the state. The thing we like to stress with this is these maps are developed by CAL FIRE. They are not OCFA's maps. They're not the City of Yorba Linda's maps. They're not the County of Orange's maps. CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry runs computer-based models based on fire history, vegetation types, flame length, blowing embers, terrain, weather. I believe this time around, they took in the 95th percentile of what typical fire weather would be for a certain area. They run it through a computer simulation, and these maps are what come out. The thing, too, we like to stress is they are a hazard map, not a risk map. So they're basically like a flood map. Basically, all this map is saying is that the areas in the red, so it was a little rough, but we try to get as much of Yorba Linda in as possible. The areas in the red in the next 30 to 50 years have a very high probability of being involved in a wildfire. It's not a guarantee. And that 30 to 50 years is just a general time frame. So, for example, the Coronado Point, the coastal fire that we just talked about in May of 2022, that canyon was a very high fire hazard severity zone. It hadn't burned since before 1914. So it was over 100 years. Where the Silverado fire in 2020 in Irvine was involved in a 2007 wildfire, and then 13 years later, in a 2020 wildfire. Or same thing with the Blue Ridge fire and the Freeway Complex fire. Parts of Yorba Linda, they burned in 2008, and then 12 years later, burned again. So the 30 to 50 years is just a general time frame. It could be longer, it could be shorter. But again, they just assess hazard, not risk. So it just says that if you're going to live in these areas or you're going to build in these areas, you need to build to a certain standard. You need to maintain your vegetation to a certain standard as well. If you're going to be living in these areas, and all that can be found in the Wildland Urban Interface Building Codes. So laws and regulations, this kind of what gives us our authority to enforce some of these standards. So local responsibility area, that is what the City of Yorba Linda falls under. Basically, it's an incorporated city or county. Essentially, that means the local fire agency is responsible for fire protection and fire prevention. Orange County is responsible for the city of Yorba Linda, Orange County Fire Authority. And then the Chino Hill State Park area, that would be considered state responsibility area. And so CAL FIRE is responsible for that, generally speaking. I say generally speaking because Orange County, we're one of 6 counties in the whole state that is considered a contract county. So we've told CAL FIRE that in Orange County, we'll take responsibility for the SRA areas. So for example, Coto de Caza is a state responsibility area. When our group goes down and does inspections in there, we're working on behalf of CAL FIRE through Orange County Fire Authority. When we're doing our inspections in Yorba Linda, we're working for Orange County Fire Authority. It's something like I said, something we like to point out. We're only 6 counties out of 58 fall underneath that contract county, so it's something that like to point out and kind of brag about a little bit. Local adopted code and ordinances, so that's right over here. California Wildland Urban Interface Code. So this is a new code book that was just recently adopted this year by the city of Yorba Linda and had to be adopted to the whole state. Basically, CAL FIRE in the state of California said instead of having the vegetation component being in the fire code and the building component in the building code, we're going to put it in the urban interface code. And so now it's a one-stop shop for anything involved in those map zones for that red, orange, and yellow, very high, moderate. If you're going to build in there, if you're going to do anything in there, you go to the urban interface code book now. So it's not in 2 separate sections. CO5 guideline for fuel modification. So I know that I heard somebody was from Cielo Vista. So that community has a fuel modification plan, and it was required to be developed or designed to the guidelines of the CO5. It's a specific planting plan. We'll go over fuel mod in a couple slides. For everyone that's not under a fuel modification plan, you would default to defensible space. And so the vegetation management recommendations and requirements for property owners, that is what we use when we do our inspections of the parcel lots or the property, the homeowners lots. And then if you live in an HOA without a fuel mod, we use the defensible space requirements for homeowner association common areas. So those are the 3 governing documents that we use to do our defensible space inspections. A couple other things, defensible space disclosure. So as of July 1st, 2021, that's when the law went into effect. It was formerly called Assembly Bill 38. Basically, if you sell your home in the red or the orange in Yorba Linda, the very high or the high, prior to close of escrow, you are required to have one of us come out and do a defensible space inspection on your property. It's just a disclosure form, so we have to disclose to the buyer if there's any vegetation issues that we're seeing. So under defensible space, if we see dead palm fronds, overgrown vegetation on the individual lot, we have to note it. It goes in the escrow packet, and it's a disclosure form. It's not designed to hold up the close of escrow. It's just another disclosure document. And then Assembly Bill 3074, that has passed as of January 1st, 2023. A couple caveats on that, though. We are still waiting on the guidelines from the Board of Forestry for enforcement of what's called Zone 0. And that's what that Assembly Bill basically speaks to. To get ahead of it, though, OCFA, as of January 1st, 2023, requires all new builds to have a Zone 0. So if you submit a field modification plan or a new development plan if you submitted it after that date, you are required to have a Zone 0 around your structure. We're calling it the immediate zone, so it's the first 5 foot around. There's planting restrictions, vegetation height restrictions, and all that. Just a little history, though, like I said, is last February, the governor wanted the Board of Forestry to release the final regulations for the existing homes. However, there's a lot of public pushback. So the 2026 deadline, the 2026 adoption deadline will not be met. They're going to continue. I think they have one. Their next meeting is in April, and they're going to take up the Zone 0 requirements again at that time. The key thing to point out too is once those regulations are adopted by the Board of Forestry, the following year, so if they're adopted in the July 2026, starting January 1st, 2027, the 3-year clock starts ticking for all existing structures. So right now it's only being required under OCFA for new builds. However, once those, like I said, those regulations are adopted, the following January 1st, the clock starts ticking for existing homes. So every home in that very high fire hazard severity zone will have to meet the requirements from the state of that Zone 0. So we're going to go into our Ready, Set, Go program. So the Ready focuses on vegetation management and home hardening. The set kind of focuses on the in-between if a fire is approaching or preparing for evacuation. And then the go is when you finally get the go to evacuate. Like I said, for the ready, we're going to focus on vegetation management. There's two types of vegetation management that we look at: a field modification plan and defensible space. We'll talk a little bit about the immediate zone, and then we'll go into home hardening. So field modification, it's a planned landscape design that reduces the threat of wildfire. It creates it's the community's fire break between areas of natural plant life and open space. The thing we like to point out about field modification is it is a very specific planting plan. And some of the newer field modification plans that are being submitted are some of the most stringent in the state under OCFA. So, for example, we require 100 where applicable. We require 170 foot of field modification behind homes between areas of open space. If you can't meet that, like I like to point out in this photo here, this is Altair and Irvine. This is after the 2020 Silverado fire. So all this back here, that burn is the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. They own that plot as federal land. We couldn't get the full 170 behind these homes. So some of the requirements were they had to be, we like to tell homeowners is, if you don't see a house in a very high severity zone on a ridge line, there's generally a reason, and that's because they couldn't meet certain requirements. Developers would make a lot more money if you had a perfect ocean view. So in this area, one of the requirements was not building them up on the ridge line, and then also having a fully irrigated zone 150 feet behind the house to break up that, to provide that fire break, and as well, back there are no trees. It's only small groupings of shrubs, and the ground cover is myoporum, so it doesn't get taller than 2 feet. As you can see here, it provides a break. So while the fire is burning out in the open space, it gives our firefighters a space to do what they need to do to ensure that any spot fires in the community are handled. When they don't have to worry about a wall of flame coming out of the open space, they can worry about spot fires in some of the interior plantings of the community. And we kind of also use this as a way to steer fire where we want to go. So with these field modification plans in 2020, we kind of directed it to certain points where it was easier or more beneficial for our firefighters to actually make an attack on the fire as it approached the community. So if you don't have a field modification plan for your individual property, or if you or your community does not have a field modification plan, you fall under what's called defensible space. So a defensible space is vegetation management of the existing vegetation on your property. One of the things we like to point out with defensible space is we're not asking anyone to moonscape or just absolutely remove everything on their property. The only time that you'll be asked for mandatory removal is of dead and dying plant material, or if you can't meet certain spacing requirements. There are certain plants that can't be cut down once they reach a certain height, so that might have to be replaced. But there also are no planting restrictions. So, for example, we've had several homeowners rip palm trees out and replant them with palm trees. We can't mandate they don't do that. We strongly advise against that. But under defensible space, you can pretty much plant whatever you want, and as long as it's green and can be maintained to our spacing requirements, you're permitted to have it. Another key thing too with defensible space is it's 100 feet from a structure or to the property line, whichever is closer. So we can't make homeowners go beyond their fence line. So we have some residents in Yorba Linda that they have 30-foot backyards and they butt up to Chino Hills State Park. We can't mandate Chino Hills State Park cut behind those homes, and we can't mandate those homeowners to go beyond their property. So we just focus on that little chunk of parcel right there, and do our best to make sure that's compliant, and then we work with them on home hardening features. Defensible space is, like I said, it's basically separation of plant material. So we're looking at horizontal separation, making sure there are no large masses of shrubs. Vertical separation, so providing starting this year, a minimum 6-foot vertical separation from vegetation beneath trees. The way that in Orange County, most trees catch on fire during wildfire events is the fire climbs into the tree. So the ground covers or the vegetation below will catch, and then it'll climb up into what we call ladder fuels. So the vertical separation reduces and removes the ladder fuels to stop the fires from getting up into the trees. Maintaining ground covers 2 foot or lower. The general rule is double the height of what's on fire, and that's how tall your flame's going to be. So if you have a 2-foot ground cover, you're going to have a 4-foot flame. It's a lot easier for firefighters to kind of hit and run a 4-foot flame than it is to try and hit, a 12-foot bush fully engulfed. You're going to have about a 24-foot flame on that. Maintain weeds and grasses below 4 inches. We hit really hard on the weeds and grasses because these are the kindling. So this is what's going to start those fires. It's going to start in the grasses, and then it's going to go to the larger fuels, and those larger fuels are what's going to put up larger embers that are going to impact the community. As you can see in this photo, this actually is from Yorba Linda after the Blue Ridge fire. Several homes, as you can see, did their defensible space 100 foot out, and you can see where the fire stopped. So the home in the middle, they had the manicured lawn that provided a good buffer, but they didn't take care of anything beyond the fence line, and it got relatively close compared to the homes on either side. Same thing with the homes over here. So that is the break right there under defensible space, is making sure that those weeds, and like I said, we in the city of Yorba Linda focus really heavily on making sure those weeds are removed and maintained less than 4 inches in height. So the immediate zone, as we talked about earlier, it's the first 5 foot around a structure. It reduces the potential ignition of fuels and prevents direct flame contact from ember exposure. So this photo is actually from a burn demonstration that we did several years ago here at our headquarters in Irvine. We built with the Insurance Business and Home Safety Institute, IBHS. With them, we built 2 identical structures. The one on the actually not entirely identical. The one on the left had unenclosed eaves, wood fencing, and had mulch and combustible vegetation directly against the home. The home on the right, you can see, had a 5-foot paver break with some mulch and vegetation outside of that 5-foot zone and a wrought iron fence. It also had enclosed eaves. You can see the red fans down below. Our firefighters ignited the mulch with drip torches on both sides. We turned the fans on, and within 30 minutes, the home on the left was completely consumed by fire. So that first 5 foot focuses on, like I said, anything combustible. So mulch being one of it. Wood-based mulches, rubber mulches are something that we recommend homeowners look at pulling away from their homes because it can actually, that's where the embers establish, and then it burns up to the home and it ignites the bushes up against it, and it gets up underneath the eaves. Another thing too is you can see the fire starting to creep along the wooden fence to the home on the right with the wrought iron fence. So that's another thing to take a look at too with the Zone Zero is recommending right now, until enforcement comes into place in the direction the state wants to go, we recommend homeowners look at either removing combustible fencing and replacing it with something non-combustible, or providing some kind of break. So a lot of homeowners have wooden gates, but they're putting like a cinder block break between the home and the fence to provide that fire break and breaking that combustible continuity to the structure. There was a fire, I believe it's called the Marshall Fire, out in Colorado a couple of years ago. Burned over 1,000 homes, and one of the contributing factors of that, they believe, was that the fire whipped along the wooden fencing between the homes. So the fire burned the wooden fencing, ignited the home, ignited the other side, and it just kind of traveled that between the houses. So we like to break up that continuity with non-combustible fencing material. Another thing too, the entire time this home on the home that's on fire got to that point, it was about 30 minutes. The home on the right with the mulch that's outside of 5 foot, that mulch smoldered the entire time. And our firefighters actually had to go and dig the mulch out to put it out. So that's one of the things with mulch is the embers can get in there, the fire front burns through, but your mulch, if it's deep enough, that fire could be smoldering underneath it for days. And then it just reaches to the surface, gets some more oxygen, and then it can reignite and start another fire again. So that's one of the things that and the state is leaning heavily away from combustible rubber mulch up against homes. There are alternatives, so we're recommending homeowners look at putting river rock, decomposed granite to help with the water conservation, because we are aware that we still need to conserve water. We're also having them take a look at putting water saving plants as well, plants that use less water, so you might not need as much mulch, or we're calling it, we get in trouble with our landscapers, but we call it inorganic mulch. So things that are like I said, river rock, pea gravel, decomposed granite, just to provide that break so a fire can't get pulled to your structure. So that's vegetation management. We're going to go over home hardening. The main objective of home hardening is to give your home the best chance to survive a wildfire. So as you can see here, homes can be retrofitted to formerly California Building Code Chapter 7A, That's now all in the California Wildland Urban Interface Code. The thing too we're going to go over with home hardening is we call it, there's different tiers. So everyone thinks that they need to go out and fully enclose their eaves. We understand that, that does offer the best form of protection, but there's also other things that homeowners can do that meet that similar intent. And we're going to cover that in the next couple slides on what homeowners can do to properly maintain their homes to withstand direct flame and radiant heat and ember intrusion. So home hardening doesn't have to be super expensive. Like I said, everyone thinks they need to enclose their eaves. Everyone thinks they need to go out and completely replace their windows. Our whole approach now is obviously things have a lifespan. So when it is time to replace the windows, that's when you take the big upgrade to the dual pane tempered glass. When you need to, when you need to repaint your home, that's when you might have the conversation about enclosing your eaves. Another thing too we found out is a lot of times you can't enclose your eaves because of ventilation requirements. So we still need to balance what the home was intended to do with helping prevent it from being involved in wildfires. So ventilation requirements might not allow you to enclose your eaves. So what's another alternative to meet the similar intent? And we'll go over that in the next couple slides. This home over here is actually called the Miracle Home from the Laguna Beach fire in 1993. It was the only home that survived on this ridgeline. And what we kind of also like to point out in this photo too is if you look, a lot of the vegetation around the homes is still green or slightly heat damaged, right? So the vegetation down below it, the vegetation up around, still green. Not a lot of, not what we would typically see with a fire racing out and taking out the whole community, which tells us the majority of these homes were lost from ember intrusion. This gentleman who owned it was an engineer, and he actually, a lot of the stuff that we now require new homes to be built with, he implemented himself back in the early 90s. So home hardening, the whole intent of home hardening is to reduce direct flame contact, radiant heat, and ember intrusion. Like I spoke about earlier, ember intrusion is the leading cause of structural loss in wildfires. It's something like over 80% of homes are lost because of embers. So I'm going to go over home hardening, and we're essentially going to talk about what to maintain. So the first thing is the roof. That's going to be the largest area of your home. It's going to have the largest surface area. It's going to be impacted first by your embers. The big thing is to make sure your roofs are being maintained appropriately and properly. So one of the things we see with tile roofs is tiles over time shift, homes settle, they'll crack from expansion and contraction in the heat of the sun, just natural kind of wear and tear. A lot of times too, at the end, you'll have what's called a mortar pack that over time will start to degrade as well and fall out. This home has rolled Spanish tile. So you can kind of see at the ends, there's a lighter orange at the end at about the ridge line. Those are called bird stops. So a lot of times those bird stops break, they fall out. The whole intent of them is to prevent birds from getting up underneath there and building nests. But where the birds go, embers can go. And we've had homes with the rolled Spanish tile actually burn out from underneath the tile because the embers were able to get up underneath it. So what to do immediately is make sure your roof's being properly maintained. Have a roofer come out every couple of years, every 5 years, just do a walk around and make sure that any shifted tiles, cracked tiles are replaced with new tiles to get that nice seal to protect your underlayment. Like I said, when it comes time, because it inevitably will, when it comes time to replace your roof, that's when you're going to want to ask for, and in the very high fire hazard severity zone areas, you will be required to build it or to install it to what's called Class A non-combustible. So Class A non-combustible not only has tile or asphalt shingle, the underlayment is fire rated, the flashings of a certain thickness, so that way if the tile shifts or is missing, embers still can't ignite the underlayment under the roof. But that, like I said, that's a high dollar ticket item, and that's when the roof needs to be replaced. That's when you do it. But in the meantime, a properly well-maintained roof goes a long way in preventing that ember intrusion up on your roof. The next thing, like I talked about, is eaves. Obviously, enclosed eaves would be the best option. A lot of the new homes, like in Cielo Vista, they're either built with enclosed eaves or what's called a false eave. So it looks like an unenclosed eave, but it actually does not get up into the attic. So the rafter tails aren't actually real rafter tails; they're just there more for aesthetic purposes. The thing with eaves is if you currently have unenclosed eaves, maintenance. So we tell homeowners, and we'll cover it in the previous slide, we do free home assessments. We'll walk around the property and take a look at your eaves from the underside. And if you see about a pencil width gap, so if the tongue and groove is starting to separate, termite damage, dry rot, we ask that homeowners fill that in with some caulk and put a good coat of latex paint over it. The latex paint will act as a barrier against flame. Unexposed, unexposed wood, I say this right. Natural wood burns quicker than painted wood, right? So that painted latex barrier provides a good little, buys you a couple more minutes, a little bit more time. But the big thing too, with like I said, with embers and eaves, going back to the roof, is if an ember can't lodge anywhere, it's going to really not be an issue. So, like I said, with the unenclosed eaves, and we'll talk about the immediate zone when we already talked about it, the embers will just eddy and just continue to rotate underneath the eave. But if they can't lodge into anything combustible, they're just going to fall out. And then we take a look at what they're going to fall into. So the thing with eaves is obviously, like I said, top tier is enclosed, but really a good coat of paint and some good painter's caulk meets the similar intent of preventing embers from lodging in that area. Vents. So the big thing with vents is we recommend and we tell homeowners 1/8 inch mesh is the magic number. A lot of older homes were built with 1/4 inch mesh or have no mesh at all in their vents. Some reading material or some material online will tell you 1/16. The thing with 1/16 is it gets clogged very easily and requires a lot of upkeep. So the 1/8 inch mesh is that magic number. It prevents the larger embers from getting up into your attic and igniting anything in there. An ember, it's a 1/4 inch, contains enough heat to ignite a 2x4. So that 1/8 inch number, if you can keep those out of there, the survivability of your home drastically increases. So we tell homeowners go 1/8 inch mesh. If you can get it from the underside of your attic, like in this photo, there's a dormer vent. The longer arrows pointing to what's called the dormer vent. It's a big scoop vent to take a lot of air in. If you can access that from the underside and put a screen of 1/8 inch mesh in it, that's great. A lot of homeowners also wrap the whole vent in 1/8 inch mesh and tack it down with machine screws. But again, when it comes time to replace your roof, that's when we would suggest looking at the baffle venting, the fire and ice ventings, the higher top tier vents. But in the meantime, that 1/8 inch mesh meets a similar intent and goes a long way as well. Another thing too we've seen also is if you get satellite dishes installed, when they install them, they'll look for the easiest way into your attic, and they'll punch a hole right through the mesh in the vent. So if you have a satellite dish and you see the cable running down like into that dormer vent, go up there and verify that the mesh has been, well, one, it's 1/8 inch mesh, replace it with 1/8 inch mesh, and verify that's completely sealed to prevent embers from getting in your attic. Another thing too we've heard is a lot of pest companies are actually starting to replace the mesh in homes with 1/8 inch mesh because 1/8 inch mesh does a really good job of keeping pests out of your attic as well. Bees can't get through 1/8 inch mesh from what we've been told. So a lot of pest companies actually will put 1/8 inch mesh in your venting to prevent little critters and stuff from getting up in there. Next thing is gutters. The common question we get asked all the time is what's better, vinyl or metal? Our response is just keep them clean. So if you have dead leaf material built up in a vinyl gutter, what will happen is it'll catch the embers. The embers will heat the vinyl, and the vinyl will melt and fall away from your home. But as it's falling away from your home, if you have combustible material around it within that first 5 foot, it's dumping that flaming material into that combustible material. Metal gutters do not melt and fall away. They can't melt. They won't melt or fall away from the home. So they'll basically keep that fire directly against your fascia board. We have had some homes where the gutter spikes that are punched into the fascia board, the fire has actually been pulled into the fascia board through the mounting hardware of the gutters. So the big thing we tell homeowners with gutters is vinyl or metal. We're good with both. The thing is just keep them clean. Once a year, if you have a lot of trees around your home, once or twice a year, getting up there yourself or hiring someone to clean them out. They have leaf guards and inserts that do a pretty good job of keeping stuff out as well. But with gutters, the big thing is keeping them clean. Chimneys, this is more for you to the open space. You are required to have a 1/2 inch spark arrestor on chimneys. Even if it's a gas chimney, you would be surprised at what people burn in their gas chimneys. So the intent of that is to make sure you're not throwing embers out onto your neighbor's property or throwing embers out into the open space. The big thing we get asked too is what do I do with my chimney in the event of an evacuation? If you have a flue, just close it. If embers get in your chimney, it's designed for heat anyway, it's going to be a non-issue. But If your flue's open, if your fireplace grates are open, embers can blow down the chimney into the home. So the big thing we tell homeowners is close your flue, close your grates on your chimney on the actual fireplace itself, and you'll be all set. Next thing is windows. Something too we get asked all the time is, you know, vinyl framed, aluminum framed, kind of going back to the gutters themselves. We're just looking for dual pane tempered glass. If we come out and we do a home assessment and we see vinyl framed windows, we'll make some recommendations about the vegetation around the window. We have had homes in fires where the bush out front catches, it starts to melt the window frame itself if it's vinyl, and the plates start to fall out. So it doesn't matter that it's tempered glass, it's just the frame has been compromised and the glass is not actually breaking from the fire itself, it's just falling out of the window. But it's on the counter side, aluminum framing, heat can be pulled into the jack studs around the window itself. So we want to see dual pane tempered glass, and we like to see vegetation around the window reduced or removed or reduced in height to prevent that direct flame being on the window as well. Same thing too. If you have an older home with single pane, window replacement is extremely expensive, and we understand that. So when we do the home assessment, that's when we'll really stress that. Let's take a look at implementing that immediate zone and reducing or removing entirely the vegetation around your single pane windows. That just buys you a little more protection. Doors, the big thing we're looking on doors is the gaskets, especially on garage doors. Garages, we like to joke, are called the California basements. Not many people actually have their cars in their garage. It's full of storage, cardboard boxes, scrap wood. So the big thing is making sure the weather sealing and the weather stripping around your garage door is tight. If your garage is closed and you go in and you take a look, if you see about a pencil width gap around the bottom, the top, or the sides, it's time to replace that stripping to prevent embers from blowing up in there. Fence material, as we talked about in the immediate zone slide, we like to see non-combustible fence material, especially within 5 foot of the home. If you have a wooden gate, we would say, hey, when it comes time to replace it, obviously go non-combustible. But in the meantime, a simple cinder block break in this section right here up against the home meets the intent of preventing a fire from being pulled to your home. It just creates that little buffer. And like I said, everything has a lifespan. Once it's time to replace, that's when we would suggest wrought iron, vinyl. Another something new that's coming out, they have aluminum wood patio covers. We're actually starting to make aluminum wood fencing. So it's aluminum, it's pressed to look like wood, but it's entirely non-combustible because it's made of aluminum. Exterior siding, again, obviously, new homes are built and we like to see stucco, non-combustible siding, stucco, brick, or rock. But if you have wooden siding, it's going to be the same thing with your eaves. If you have any termite damage, dry rot, get that sealed and painted. Again, on a home assessment, we'll take a look at the vegetation as well. If you have areas of combustible siding, we would recommend to implement the immediate zone in that area. Same thing though with stucco. Is again, if you have any areas that are failing, so the stucco is starting to wear away, you're starting to see large cracks develop, seal it up with some stucco patch, put a coat of paint, and you restore the integrity of that stucco siding. And then the immediate zone, that first 5 foot, we're looking at anything non-combustible in there, mulch, combustible plant material. We'd recommend replacing it with river rock and more succulent based or things that hold moisture a little better than like you typically see around a home. We have some homes have cypress trees right up against them. On a home assessment, we take a step back and say, hey, it might be time to replace that with something less combustible and more fire resistant. On the rear, patio covers and decking. Again, patio covers, if it's wood, good coat of paint, some painter's caulk. When it's time to replace the patio cover though, that's when we would recommend going with aluminum wood and reducing that combustible nature of the patio cover. During a fire, and we'll talk about it on the slide too, we ask the homeowners pull combustible furniture away from their home if they have time. That's one of the first things our firefighters will do when they come into a home. If they have to make a stand, anything combustible within that first 5 foot that's movable, they'll move it as far away from the home as possible. This right here is a QR code. I'll come back to this slide to make sure you guys can see it as well. You can also go to the ocfa.org RSG home assessment. You can email RSG OCFA and call that number as well. We do free home assessments in any part of Yorba Linda. So just even if you're not mapped, an inspector will come out and we'll spend anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour with you, walking your entire property, pointing out areas that you can harden or areas that you can do work to harden your home against the wildfire. The thing we like to stress, like we said, is it's free. We prioritize these because we are very big on education over enforcement. So if we come out and we see any defensible space violations, we'll point them out, but we won't issue a notice because we want to make sure that people feel safe to call us out. Another thing too is we don't report to anyone else except for CAL FIRE. And even with CAL FIRE, we just let them know that we did a home assessment. We get state funding. If we do more of these, we get more funding, and it allows us to get more bodies to do more inspections and do more home assessments in the community. So the only people that find out that we did a home assessment is CAL FIRE themselves. Again, it's pretty anonymous. We're not putting in people's names and emails and phone numbers and stuff like that. But scan this QR code or go to this website, schedule your home assessment, and we'll get someone out there and we'll take some time to walk around with you. Another thing too, we do have a survey on our website as well that allows you to do it yourself. So if you don't want an inspector to come out, you can do it. We have a home assessment tool. You can do it on your own. Basically, it's a bunch of pictures. Does your roof look like this? Does your roof look like this? And you just click the photos on what it is, and it will give you a little survey at the end. It'll email you a survey on the recommendations that we would suggest to harden your home. So you've done the vegetation management, you've hardened your home against wildfire. Now we're getting into the get set portion. The big thing here is prepare your family. So we call it the 6 Ps: people and pets, papers, prescriptions, pictures, personal computers, and plastics. Another thing too is always have a plan. So have multiple ways out of your community. Understand the routes around your home. Have a predetermined location. I grew up over in Anaheim Hills. Was evacuated during the Freeway Complex fire. Got evacuated during the Canyon 2 fire. During the Freeway Complex fire, one of the things we found was cell phones were still relatively newish at the time. Trying to call out was impossible. Once the evacuation notice kind of goes out, the cell towers are overwhelmed by people trying to call out and people trying to call in. So you might not be able to get in contact with loved ones that are back in the evacuation zone, or you might not be able to get in contact with a spouse or someone that's out shopping, let's say. So have a predetermined location. Ours was grandma's house. She lived down by Knott's Berry Farm during the Canyon 2 fire. When I got evacuated, I was home. My brothers were at school. We went to grandma's house. That way you just have an area that everyone can go to. You can get a head count and make sure everyone's safe. The escape route thing is huge as well. If you're always used to making a left out of your neighborhood and going to the store that way, we recommend one day making a right. Find out where going right takes you. Because the sheriff's department will talk about with evacuations. The evacuation routes are determined by the sheriff's department, but they take our information from where the fire is coming. So if the fire is coming from the north and your road runs up north, you might not be able to go that way. They're going to direct you the safest way possible. But understanding the street system around your home is huge to make sure that everyone can get out safely. No one's clogging roads. Everyone knows where they're going and following the directions of the sheriff's department. Under the 6 Ps, the big thing we point out too is pets. Everyone focuses on the people. Make sure if you have any cats, dogs, rabbits, pets, that they have also emergency supplies as well for if you are evacuated. That's one of the things we find is a lot of homeowners, they'll just grab the dog and they'll put it in the car, but they won't get a leash. They won't take their collar. They won't, they'll forget to grab pet food. Just make sure your pets have an emergency evacuation kit as well. Make sure the people do in your home as well. One of the things, all these 6 Ps, one of the things after in 2008, when I was on the Anaheim hillside, the wind kind of shifted and we weren't under an evacuation at the time. And it blew up to the end of my mom's community. And suddenly we were being evacuated, right? We had minutes to grab what we could off the walls and what we could in our home. Everything was scattered. My birth certificate was in my room. My brothers were in my parents' room. Everything was all over the house, pictures and all that. So after that, my dad did, and something, that you can do once a month. He was basically like, hey, you got 5 minutes to grab what you can. What can you grab? We have 20 minutes to grab. What can we get in 20 minutes? And it just kind of makes you analyze what, if you have 10 minutes to get, what are you getting and where is it located? Another thing too with pictures, A lot of the pictures in 2008 were still, they were old pictures. They were in frames, they were in bags, hard copies. We took the time to scan those to CDs and scan those up. And now I'm actually helping our mom scan them to the cloud. So that way, if we don't have time to grab the pictures, we at least have digital copies available as well. Prescriptions is huge too, especially if you're taking medications or you're elderly. Um, a lot of times you will not be permitted back into your community until it is deemed safe. So understanding what prescriptions you have, knowing you're having your doctor's phone number. If you're under an evacuation, you can generally call them and say, hey, I'm being evacuated or I am evacuated. Can I get a couple days supply of my heart medicine if you don't have time to grab those? Or if you're out and you can't get back in. Personal computers, grab your iPads, desktops if you still have them, and plastics. Plastics kind of encompasses credit cards, but also wallets and purses. We find a lot of times that homeowners are so focused on everything else, getting all that stuff in the car, that they'll leave their wallets behind. And then they have no form of cash or ability to go out and buy food for the night or get a hotel room or something like that. So make sure that you take your purses and your wallets with you. Outdoors, like I said, if you have time, move flammable items that are movable away from your house. Turn off water. This is not the water to your home, but this is if you have a garden hose and you're checking for spot fires and it's time to leave, shut the spigot off to that garden hose. If you have irrigation that's on a timer and you have time and can, turn the irrigation, the landscaping irrigation off as well. The thing with water is our hydrants come off the domestic water lines. So just like irrigation to people's front yards, if your sprinklers go off at 2 in the morning and now a bunch of other neighbors start to go off as well, or a bunch of people leave their garden hoses running, that does affect the pressure in the system and it does affect the pressure on the hydrants. The big thing is turn the water off to those, like I said, those sprinklers, to your landscaping irrigation, and any garden hoses if you're using it to extinguish small fires on your property. Indoors, big thing people forget all the time is shutting their windows. So you have a window open, wind's blowing, you're getting a good breeze. Now you have your evacuation. Make sure you shut all your windows and doors. If you can, move the furniture away from your windows and doors. And a big thing also is shut your AC off. Your air conditioning is designed to kind of pull air in through your home, so you can actually start to pull in. The big thing is you might not necessarily pull embers in, but if you're far enough away, you start to pull smoke into your house. You might not have, you might not be affected by the embers, but now you're affected by smoke damage. So your home's not going to smell too well. So make sure you shut that AC off on the way out. The big thing though with this is if time permits, right? We want to make sure, and we'll talk about in the next slide, that life comes before property. So when you get the evacuation text or the evacuation phone call or sheriffs come through and says it's time to go, it's time to go. Over here on the go slide, big thing is leave before you're told. So in my mom's neighborhood in 2008, it took us 2 hours to go down Santa Ana Canyon Road from my mom's house. It was bottlenecked like crazy. So if you're out in your front yard, we all live in the area. We know the way the winds blow. If the wind's blowing on your face and you're facing the column of smoke and you don't feel safe, start packing your car up. If you're under a voluntary evacuation, it's leave. The worst thing you do is you just come back home, right? Our firefighters prefer an entirely empty neighborhood to come into, right? Because like I said, life comes first over property. So if they can come in there and start going to work, that's ideal and what they're looking for. Take your valuables and your emergency kits, practice your escape routes, or head to an evacuation location. Leaving early will prevent you from getting caught in fire, smoke, or congestion. We all saw the videos up in the Palisades where the LA County had to bring a bulldozer in to clear the cars off the roads. So that was caused from a panic. People started running and other people started running and they took their keys with them or left their cars. If everyone's leaving before they're told and everyone's practicing their escape routes and they have an idea of where they're going, it's generally a lot smoother. Don't endanger yourself or first responders. Like I said, life comes first. If they have to go in there and rescue you, they're putting themselves at risk and they're not able to focus on the homes. And like I said, the big thing is don't wait. This right here is our, I send the presentation. rsg@ocfa.org is the email address. That's a QR code that takes us to our Ready, Set, Go webpage. on our RSG page. We have a bunch of flyers on and documents on everything regarding home hardening, vegetation management, what to put in the wildfire evacuation kit. All that information is there. It's downloadable. It's PDF. Feel free to download it, print it out, hand it out to your neighbors. It's all free to the public. And that's where you're going to go to schedule your home assessments. And if anyone's got any questions, we'll take some questions.
Thank you so much for that informative presentation. If folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm happy to read them for everybody's benefit, or raise your hand or unmute yourself. Bob, I saw you unmute. Did you have a question?
Well, I thought it was a great presentation. I just thought I'd mention that the home that burned down on our street, it was the balcony that caught fire. I'm 98% sure that it was the wooden balcony. Our neighborhood of 5 cul-de-sacs off Via del Agua was about 60 homes, and about 50 of them were 2-story with wooden balconies, just painted wood. And I think probably 80% of the people still have those original wood balconies. And the house that burned down, the balcony was on the east side, so it was getting hit with embers from the westward blowing winds. And yeah, I'm looking for advice on new balconies, and I sent a letter to the neighbors, and I've got a few ideas. But yeah, I've heard the construction process is just awful because codes have changed since 1986. And I've also wanted to mention we got a new roof a little over a year ago, and yeah, we've got O'Hagan vents in the roof that we didn't have before. The main vents now have like a fiberglass material because, at least in Yorba Linda, replacing the 1/4-inch grid with 1/8 was not good enough. And yeah, we had to do a different underlayment than was the usual, partly due to fire, partly due to better insulation. Yeah, so I'm just agreeing with that you covered a lot of really good things.
Yeah, like going back to what you said. So if you're in a very high fire hazard severity zone, when you go to retrofit or do certain work to your home, you are required to use the current code stuff. So that's why you have the fiberglass or the baffle venting. The 1/8 inch mesh, like we talked about, it's an interim. It's what to do in the meantime until you get to the point where you have to go to the city and submit, and pull permits for your roofing. At that point, the city will make sure that, like Bob was saying, that you're going to have, O'Hagan vents or Firebrand or Brand Guard and all that. You will have to put those vents at that time. But our whole thing right now is, if you're looking at your house, it was built in the 80s, and you're not seeing, you're seeing 1/4-inch mesh, you're seeing giant dormer scoop vents on your roof's starting to fail in certain areas. Do something now to maintain it and offer some form of protection. And then, like you said, in Bob's case, when he went to replace his roof, that's when all those new fancy construction features are going to be put in. And that's what like I said, a lot of the new homes are being built, are required to be built that way as well. So in Cielo Vista, they are required to be built with all those fire prevention, fire hardening features. So yeah, don't think, like Bob was saying, don't think the 1/8 inch mesh is, it buys you time, but eventually you will need to upgrade to the higher end vents to help prevent ember intrusion.
Yeah, the 1/8 inch vents at Home Depot were like $4, and the ones that we got to meet code were like $100 each. So there's an incentive to go the Home Depot way if for a temporary satisfaction of your safety.
Exactly, and a lot of that thing too is a lot of companies, like I said, they sell those vents. So like some homeowners have underneath the eaves, they'll have what are called bird hole vents. So they're like 3 little holes that are drilled in the board that allows airflow up in there. They sell inserts online. They have companies that sell inserts. We've seen them anywhere from $10 to $15 an insert. We have some homes that have 100 plus of these little bird hole vents, right? Like Bob was saying, a roll of 1/8 inch mesh at Home Depot is $50 for a giant roll. Cut it into strips and tack it over there. And then as time goes on, save a little money, we'll do a quarter this year, quarter next year, quarter that year, and eventually you'll get there. But yeah, it's our whole home assessment program is what can you do today, what can you look at doing in the future, and what's cost effective to the homeowner at the time. Prior, and we actually learned this from the coastal fire, is prior to that, we were always talking about the high end option, but people glaze over. We had a homeowner in Dove Canyon enclose their eaves. They spent $30,000 to enclose their eaves. That's not feasible for a majority of the people that we interact with in the county. So we had to restructure our home assessments and go in a way where let's look at the general maintenance. Let's look at things that meet the intent. And that's what we stressed in that slide is once things meet the end of their lifespan and need to be replaced, that's when we look at the Cadillac option. But in the meantime, let's get the mid-level option to just offer some form of protection, and it's better than doing nothing at all or leaving what might be originally on the older home.
Claire, I saw you unmuted. Do you have anything to add? Claire?
Yeah. No, I think we're good. That was really interesting. I learned some new stuff, and I was glad to see a step-by-step approach, because it is unaffordable for most what needs to be done, especially for older homes.
Yes, definitely. Like I said, those home assessments, that's what we take into account. We'll take a look on the property and we'll point things out, like I said, that could be done that day. And it could be as simple as, you can have us out on a Monday and that Saturday, or you're out ripping some bushes out from underneath the window and replacing it with some flowers, a little 4-pack of flowers from Home Depot that cost $5. So that's kind of the main approach we're taking to really get the older communities and the older built homes built to the standard of what a lot of the newer stuff's being built to, trying to get them to that point eventually.
Great. Will, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I had a question. So this is Will. We purchased one of the homes in Cielo Vista, and we understood through the purchasing process that there was an emphasis on fire safety in the construction of the homes. Is there anything that you're aware of in the Cielo Vista construction that we should be aware of for improvements for fire safety?
So the big thing with newer built homes that are built to that higher standard, it's going to be continually to maintain the house like the way it was built. So pay attention to those features. And if you start, again, because everything wears and tears over time, if you're starting to see things start to fail, get that replaced or fixed to keep that original integrity. Because your home was built that way at day one, but over the next 10, 15, 20 years, homes settle, things shift. Like I said, things just naturally wear and tear. So just in your guys' case in Cielo Vista and in a lot of the newer homes that are being built, we really stress the maintenance portion. It's going to be keeping it built the way it is, keeping it looking the way it is as it was built day one.
Are there any specific maintenance items that you would call out to be looking for?
I would say the big thing would be your siding. Like I said, as homes start to settle, especially with newer homes, if you're starting to see stucco cracking and you're starting to get large cracks in the stucco, where the heat and the sun's causing it to expand and contract, sealing those up. A newer built home might not have this risk, but if someone's, like I said, we talked about earlier, if someone's putting a satellite dish in, how are they getting how are they getting those lines into the home, right? A lot of newer built homes generally have a connection, but is the satellite installer aware of that? Are they punching through a vent to get into the attic? And if that's the case, make sure that around that area is replaced or sealed up. Another thing too that I'm trying to think as well is solar panels. If they're not already installed on the home when it's built, and a lot of new homes are being built that way, that's an option from the developer. If someone's having a third party company coming in and doing that, verifying with the company, and then also maybe if you're not too sure about the company, having a roofer come out to make sure that they didn't crack any tiles when they were walking on the roof and installing it. Did they install the flashing the correct way? Right? It's designed to be waterproof, but did they leave missing tiles? Did they crack tiles? Did they not seal the flashing appropriately? So that would be stuff that on the newer build homes to pay attention to. Would definitely be your siding. I haven't been to Cielo Vista personally, but I know over here in Orchard Hills, a lot of the enclosed eaves on some of the homes that were built, like about 10 years ago, the stucco's starting to fail under there. They're starting to get cracks under there. So we're telling the homeowners go back in and patch that up because you're starting to lose that enclosed integrity. So those are some of the big areas that I'd say for you guys to pay attention to.
Got it. And then, the last quick question would be, you indicated that the primary, one of the primary sources of fire in homes is embers getting into the attic. What are the root cause materials for fire ignition in an attic space?
So from what we've been told, that's what I like to tell homeowners, especially if your home's been there for a while. Your 2x4s and the way your home's been built up in that attic, they're going to sit there and they're basically going to get kiln dried, right? They're just going to continue to dry over time, and they're like toothpicks. It takes very little for them to actually ignite. So that's the big thing, is making sure that those vents are sealed to prevent embers from getting there and igniting the 2x4 on older homes that have been around for a while as well. Storage, another thing too, is dust buildup. You see some homes that have pretty intensive layers of dust up in their attics because it's just designed for airflow. So the big thing is the 2x4s catching. Like I said, an ember over a quarter inch or larger actually sustains enough energy to ignite a 2x4, especially one that's been in a home for 30, 40, 50 years. It's just been, essentially drying out for that long time, that amount of time. So that's the root cause, is storage in there, excessive dust buildup, or the 2x4s themselves.
And is there any advantage to watering down the outside of the home, the immediate area, in a high fire event, or if you see that there is fire, right? You're in the line of sight of the fire coming. Does that help in any way?
So a garden hose watering down the side of your house, it's going to, and standing in a wind event, it's going to dry up before the fire even gets there. One of the things that one of the water districts that we work with recommended is, if you have a red flag day, maybe you increase the moisture of the vegetation around your home. So maybe go out and give it a little extra water in the morning. But watering down your house with a garden hose, no, it doesn't really. It's going to dry, and the moisture is going to be sucked out, especially in a high wind event. A lot of homeowners ask about putting sprinklers on their roofs. In wind-driven fires, the reality is that water is going to be blown onto your neighbor's home, especially when you have 30, 40, 80 mile an hour gusts. Another thing too is, going back to it, if you're pulling water off the domestic system and we need pressure in the system for the hydrants to work, it can be actually seen as a negative to that. We want to maintain that integrity in the water system to make sure that our firefighters have full availability of all the hydrants as well. So like I said, long story short, the only thing we'd say is, if it's a red flag day, it's really dry and windy, maybe do a little extra watering on the vegetation around the home. But in the event of an actual fire, spraying water on the side of the house, spraying water on the roof is pretty negligible in actually protecting it.
Got it. And then, I know I've asked a lot of questions. Just one last quick question is, so I'm just going to create a quick scenario, right? A fire breaks out, we're downwind, or actually downwind of the Santa Ana, smoke's coming. We're trying to evacuate and get out. Is there a particular kind of mask that you may recommend that homeowners have to prevent smoke inhalation or impacts from smoke?
I just off the top of my head, I'd say like an N95, something that you would use if you're doing, to really filter out the large particulate. So I'd go that route.
Okay.
Just a good N95 mask.
Gotcha. Like we see in fires people outside running trying to get out, and they're inhaling all of this stuff, right? So there's got to be some protection outside of a bandana. I did read that it's not a good practice to get it wet, as that will clog up mud, like it'll just prevent airflow. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, you want to keep, we all during COVID, you wear masks. When we're out working in the field, we had to replace them because even just the sweat would clog them up. It got more difficult to breathe in. So yeah, don't get them wet. Just use them as they are out of the box.
Gotcha. Okay.
You might
Thank
want
you
to
for
consider
indulging
having
all the
you
questions.
might want to consider having goggles as well. If it's bad like it was in 2008, and you're getting ashes in your eyes, that's gonna make it harder to evacuate or do anything.
Yeah, good point.
One question I had was, what about the neighbors with untrimmed palm trees? My recollection of OCFA's checklist was mostly about keeping shrubs low, so fire can't jump to the trees. I don't really recall much mention of unskinned palm trees, but those were really catching fire in our next door neighbor's yard in 2008, and the homeowners the homeowners with the current unskinned palm trees weren't here in 2008. They probably don't understand the hazard. Um, should I suggest OCFA drop by, or anyway, what are your thoughts on how to encourage neighbors to have a little more fire safe yards?
Yeah, so we do have an inspection program. So our inspection program right now is focused on the perimeter homes of Yorba Linda that butt Chino Hill State Park. So inspectors do go out, like I said, with unskinned palm trees or dead palm fronds. They will get a violation notice to cut those and have those removed. So if it's a home that is annually inspected, they will get notification to do that. If it's a home that's not annually inspected, you can email Eric or you can submit a complaint and we can go out and have a conversation with the homeowners ourselves. But yeah, anything dead or dying has to be removed. So if you have a palm tree with a bunch of dead palm fronds or even one palm frond, that is a mandatory removal and is something that we will take a look at. So if you want to talk to your neighbor yourselves, you can do that. If you find yourself not getting anywhere with that, like I said, we do have the complaint process, and then the inspector will go out and investigate. Any violations will get issued the notice. And it's part of the annual inspection program. Once a year, we'll get eyes on it. Again, though, outside of that annual inspection window, like we go through in about April. Actually, we're going to be starting here in a couple months. Our inspection window is April, May. So if you're finding it's September and there's some more dead palm fronds that popped up, just let us know. Give us a call.
Yeah, it's not so much the dead palm fronds; it's the little cups when they trim off the palm frond. It's the little cups that catch the embers, and they're full of tinder and they just ignite.
Yeah,
We had
so
flying frisbee fire back in 2008 as those things fell off the trunk.
yeah, so if it's from what we've been told by arborists, certain palm trees, like queen palms in particular, they have to leave a chunk at the top to keep the crown moist so it doesn't kill the palm tree. That is one of the reasons why, if you were to build your home today, they couldn't have queen palms. They can't have fan palms. That's something that's not permitted under new builds. And that's something too that we talk to homeowners about. Is we ask them, we say, hey, we recommend replacing these. Now, again, under defensible space, it's not a mandatory removal. Only the dead or dying is. But again, we'll have a conversation with them on that. One of the palms that we are okay with, and that's what we've seen recently get a little ground with, is we'll say, hey, the queen palms are a bad idea, but what if you got rid of them and replaced them with a king palm? Because a king palm, actually the whole husk comes with the palm frond when it dies. So you don't have that bird's nest left behind that you see on some of the other types of palms. So if we had to pick a palm, we'd pick a king palm. But certain palms, like I said, they have to keep a portion of that crown intact to make sure the tree doesn't die. But
Yeah, in our neighborhoods, they're all the native fan palms, and the birds spread the seeds and they just pop up in people's yards.
oh yeah, oh yeah, they're like a weed. They will go everywhere. Um, and we, like I said, if it's under defensible space, we'll make a recommendation to have them removed. But we'll also educate the homeowner onto it. At a minimum, that palm fronds need to be removed, and anything that isn't, integral to the tree surviving has to be removed. So, if we see like a fan palm that has the bottom portions, all the little cups are grayed out, we'll have those removed, but they have to keep some portion near the top to keep the crown alive, to prevent it from killing the whole tree.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah.
I would say to Will, those were great questions. And what's most likely to burn your house down for any of us is our neighbor's house. Right now, you have a fire safe community, and the question is going to be whether you can keep it and continue to obey, the guidelines that were established in the design of it. So
That's good feedback. Yeah, I think we're all looking out for each other, which is good because we're all aware of the location, right? And the HOA also does a good job policing it, sending out notices if they identify anything. So it seems like a fairly good program at this point.
Sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
And that thing too is making sure your HOA, obviously boards change, making sure that they are aware of that as well. An example is we have a community in Irvine. They are not permitted to have certain plants in certain parts of the yards. The HOA is responsible for enforcing that, but if we catch it on inspection, we can enforce it. And it's causing a lot of backlash in the community because the HOA architectural committee permitted it. But then we're coming through and we're saying no. So it's great that your board's currently active and involved, and that's awesome. But over time, make sure that they continue to be aware of that, because like I said, it's going to cause, it could down the line cause some issues. And exactly, it's not necessarily, once the fire gets established in the community, that's when you get the conflagration. That's when it goes home to home, like Claire was saying. And may not necessarily be the embers come from the open space, but it's going to be your neighbor's house that's going to be the issue. And the same thing with the residents that have older homes. If you call us out for a home assessment, tell your neighbors. The more homes that are hardened against wildfire, the better that whole community is going to survive. So have us out, let your neighbors know. Get your neighbors to contact us. We, in the past, have done community inspections, or if you want us to have to come out to your house and you want to invite 10 neighbors, and we'll just use your house as an example. We've done that before too. So we're really big on the home hardening, especially in the older communities, to prevent that home-to-home ignition, that conflagration event.
As we not so jokingly said in previous fires, you're only as safe as the weakest link in the neighborhood. So anyways.
Yeah, we're trying to work a term, one that we come up with. We're trying to work a term on an education piece for that. We're calling it community immunity.
Oh, nice. There you go.
That was good.
All right.
Well, I just wanted to say I put something in the chat. There's a product called Thermogel that has shown up at various events that we've held, that you just spray it on with a hose and it turns into a foam and it stays on for 12 hours or so, and you can do it as you leave. So.
Oh, is it harmful to vegetation?
So they say not, but if you're choosing between burning your house down and having runoff into the vegetation, that's a choice.
Yeah, that's an easy decision to make for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Thermogel, thank you so much.
Yep.
And I will say, if at some point we end up hosting community events, we might be looking for vendors, and Nathan, we would look to OCFA for ideas on folks we may want to invite to that, to keep the community apprised of kind of the latest technologies and things to do to keep each other safe. So I am aware of the time, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Nathan, thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. I will have this up on YouTube probably in the next 48 hours or so. And then our next presenter is from the Sheriff's Department, and our next meeting is April 2nd. So Thursday, April 2nd, 7 o'clock. And hopefully we'll have a few more pieces checked off the list of forming the nonprofit, and we'll learn about fire evacuation and the sheriff's role in that at the next meeting. So thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.